He was a tall, 32-year-old man, and on this seemingly normal night, he was walking the long, dark path to the liquor store when he should have just used Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits from stores near you, then get them delivered to your door. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Get the home field advantage every time with Fairfield by Marriott, official hotel partner of the NCAA. Whether you're a student athlete working toward your championship dreams or your team's biggest fan, Fairfield by Marriott has everything you need to get ready for game day. From comfortable guest rooms to complimentary hot breakfast, Fairfield is part of the Marriott Bonvoy portfolio of hotels and official hotel partner of the NCAA. Visit fairfield.marriott.com to book your next game day stay.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts and Q&A lets us be more creative on another level. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome into The Verge, a show which covers the Baltimore Orioles minor leagues. The Verge is part of BSL Radio. Baltimore Sports and Life is dedicated to analysis and discussion on the Orioles, Baltimore Ravens, and the University of Maryland. The site has a team of writers providing coverage of those teams and houses live streaming content weekly. Join the conversations at the message board, like BSL on Facebook, and follow BSL on Twitter.
Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. We've got a lot to get into because a lot of things have actually happened that have been prospects/young player related with the Orioles since we last recorded last week. Just a quick recap, the Orioles have made a couple of trades, trading Hector Velasquez to the Astros. The right-handed pitcher went to Houston for a player to be named later. And Richard Blyer, who had been a pretty solid contributor to the Orioles bullpen over the last few seasons, was traded to Miami Marlins again for a player to be named later, and we expect to see a lot of that this year, but we'll get into that in a moment. In addition, we're going to talk about 7-inning doubleheaders, what our impressions are of them from the minor league side, having seen them there for years, and how they fit into this season. DJ Stewart struggled before he was sent down. We're going to talk about him a little bit. Ryan Mountcastle continues to work out at Bowie, and I think like most Orioles fans, we are still anxiously awaiting to see Mountcastle. So that and some of the other topics we're going to get into today. I will make a quick note that I did write a story yesterday arguing that the Orioles should bring up Ryan Mountcastle sooner rather than later. You can check that out on BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com. Bob's weekly series, 3 Up, 3 Down, looking at the 3 hottest players as well as the 3 players struggling the most on the Orioles, is back. He had a story earlier this week. And, Nick, I believe you have a story coming this weekend, correct?
Yep, I think Sunday is when it should go up. And I think it's going to be about the bullpen. So stay on the lookout for that.
Yep, so continue to check out BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com and check us out on Twitter at BSL on the Verge. To get into the transactions here, as I noted, Hector Velasquez, right-handed pitcher, traded by the Orioles to the Houston Astros. Astros have been dealing with a lot of injuries, so they get some depth there. In addition, Richard Blyer, the South Florida native, is traded to the Miami Marlins after a few solid seasons in Baltimore. the Marlins were, at that point when they made the deal, still waiting to come back after an outbreak of coronavirus in their clubhouse, forced about a week-long suspension or so to their season. They resumed action this week in Baltimore, sweeping the Orioles over a 4-game series. So I'll start with you, Nick. What were your impressions of these trades, and what sort of prospect value, if any, do you expect the Orioles to get back once we know who the players that are coming to Baltimore are?
Yeah, I mean, with the Velasquez trade, it's kind of, I don't really have much of an opinion there. I mean, just get a lottery ticket type prospect, hopefully. And he was a guy that I don't think the Orioles are planning on using very much this year. I think he's a guy, I don't know if very many people knew he was even on the roster. So, I mean, hopefully just some lottery ticket guy, see what happens with him. The Blyer trade, though, I am going to say, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy here that says, I called this. I said we should talk about this. It was one of the Yankees games where they had a rain delay in the middle of the game. I fell asleep, didn't finish it. So at work the next day, I had it up just on in the background, watching the rest of that game. And I made a note just as I'm watching games. I jot notes, anything we want to talk about in the episode or anything. And I said we need to start talking about Richard Blyer as being the guy that the Orioles trade instead of Michael Givens, just because he's healthy again, clearly. I think last year's numbers were kind of a fluke, and he wasn't fully healthy. So he's healthy. He looks good in those first few outings. He costs next to nothing versus Michael Givens, who has that extra years of control, high strikeout guy. I think the Orioles are going to hold off for a high price tag for him still. So Blyer could be that guy, that veteran that a bullpen looks to. And then a couple hours later, it happens. I think with that one, the type of prospect I'm looking at, with the player to be named later, it's only because you can't trade guys who aren't on your 60-man player pool. So there's kind of that way around the rule. But I think maybe like an Isaac Mattson type prospect, maybe a guy who probably doesn't slide into our top 30, but on the level of some of those pitchers that we got back in the Angels trade with Dylan Bundy, again, or another high-risk lottery type ticket. And if so, that's fine. No one ever said a bad thing about Richard Blyer. I don't think any of us have anything bad to say about him. He's a great guy, fun to watch, but as a 33, 34-year-old on a rebuilding team, he didn't have a place, so see what we get back.
Yeah, the Blyer trade is much more interesting. I think, to me, it's Elias taking advantage of the Marlins' desperation, and he talked about how they had been interested in Blyer even before the COVID situation broke down. So I think this might have been his chance to get a little bit extra than they would have been willing to give up before all this stuff went down. And yeah, I think it'll be a low A type of arm or just some high upside, maybe low floor prospect that we have some particular interest in. Hopefully they have that all worked out, and as soon as the season's over, they'll announce who it is. That'll be exciting when we accrue like 5 players to be named later, and then at the end of the season we get to see who they all are. It's like opening a Christmas gift. And as far as Hector Velasquez, I think that's just Elias throwing a bone to his old team and like, remember this for the future in case we have any negotiations down the line.
Yeah, I think that the Blyer trade is the one that I'm going to be watching a lot more closely. Like Nick said, I don't expect there to be. I would be surprised if the player or players that come back in that trade make our top 30 list when it's updated sometime over the offseason. But I still think the Orioles might be able to get maybe the next version of Richard Blyer, the guy that kind of flies under the radar in the minor leagues. But, maybe you have someone that's close to a major league ready product you get back from Miami, or like Bob said, someone in low A who is kind of a higher risk prospect, but definitely someone with some potential. So I'm intrigued to see what the Orioles do there. But in both cases, it was really driven in part by the Marlins and the Astros not having a lot of depth when they made the trades. And I really expect that as the season goes on, we might see a few more types of trades along those lines, where the Orioles trade from their bullpen, trade from their bench, send off a major league player for a player to be named later to a team that really needs the help.
Yeah, Cole Sulser. That's the name next name I'm throwing out.
He might be a keeper, but I wouldn't be surprised either. But another thing to note is Blyer's, 31 years old. He's a little bit, even though he doesn't have much service time, he's a little bit older of a relief prospect. And he is what he is at this point. So I don't think he's going to start getting expensive as he gets into his arbitration years. So another thing is, I don't think they wanted to go into arbitration for 3 years with Richard Blyer.
Yeah, so I'm looking this up now. Richard Blyer is 33.
Even older? Yep.
Yeah, so he's eligible for free agency. Baseball Reference puts it at 2023, which I believe means he will actually be eligible for free agency after the 2022 season. So the Marlins, if they keep him throughout that duration, have about 2.5 years of a pitcher who finds success despite not striking people out. He doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts. In fact, he generates very few. But one thing that I think we can say positive about Blyer over his tenure was you could bring him out in the bullpen, he was going to throw strikes.
Yep. That's definitely true. And it seemed like his teammates liked him a lot. He seemed like a guy that was loved in the clubhouse. Hopefully the young guys learned a lot from him and can take it away with them moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about the arbitration thing, though, and I can't remember where I saw this, but I think the Orioles have like 9 or 10 arbitration-eligible guys next year, so that could help add to that more trades as the season goes along, although trade deadline is about 3 weeks away, so see what happens there.
Yeah, we are coming up quickly on that August 31st deadline. I actually saw that, Nick, as well, the list of players, and I'm going to try to track that down before the end of the show and kind of give listeners a sense of where the Orioles stand right now with players that will be arbitration eligible after the season. But another topic we wanted to get into is the implementation of 7-inning doubleheaders, which for those of us that have been following minor league baseball for a long time are not an uncommon thing, because 7-inning doubleheaders have been the norm in minor league baseball for years and years. Major League Baseball, meanwhile, has stuck to 9-inning doubleheaders, traditionally in a day-night format, which you don't see in the minor leagues. It's generally just one gate opening for 2 games. For this season, though, MLB going with the 7-inning doubleheaders. Bob, what is, first of all, your overall, how do you feel about 7-inning doubleheaders, and what do you think of MLB going to it for this year?
In general, when it comes to the minor leagues and how they do it, I think it makes complete sense. They don't have minor league teams don't have another minor league team that they can just grab from if they need extra arms on the day after a doubleheader. So it helps, and winning is not the number one prerogative in the minor league. So it makes complete sense down there. And for this year to implement it, I think, yeah, it's fine. I mean, do whatever you got to do. Any rule changes you got to make for this year just to get through it, yeah, that's fine with me. Long term, I don't know about implementing it long term. Let's just see how it goes this year before I really make a determination on how I feel about that. But my first reaction is this year, perfectly fine. I get it. And let's see what happens after that.
I love the 7-inning doubleheader. Just from watching it in the college ranks, watching it from the minor league perspective, they're quick, they're fast-paced, typically. And it seems like in the minor leagues, though, that first game is going to go into extra innings at least. And then by the second game, I will admit, sometimes I've been to those games, especially if it's like a getaway day, that second game is over in like an hour and 45 minutes because guys are just swinging at everything. But I love them. Moving forward, do I want to see them? Honestly, I wouldn't be mad if they scheduled some of these like Saturday. Do Saturday, start at 12:30 at Camden Yards. You watch 2 7-inning games, go out to dinner, you're still in bed by 10 o'clock at night. Like, sounds like a great day to me. But for this year, it makes complete sense. Just because you look at the Cardinals, I think just earlier today, a couple hours ago, they had more positive cases. So I think they're playing the Cubs this weekend, and it doesn't look like they're going to be playing the
anymore.
Cubs. Yeah, not tonight at least. I think that's the only thing official that I've seen so far. So I believe the numbers that I saw were 55 or 56 games in like 49 days. And so they've got to play doubleheaders. And the 7-inning games, if you got a pitcher that can go 6 innings, you're really saving your bullpen there. So bullpen arms are rested. Just the players on the field having to play so many games are going to be rested. Again, they move fast. You watch those games. I watched the Orioles-Marlins series. Both of those games, thank God, they were only 7 innings. We don't have to watch any more of that. I watched the Trevor Bauer in his complete game that he pitched. The Reds and Tigers were the first 2 teams to do it. 2.5-hour games, move along, go to the next one. It's 2020, so I'm fine with them this year, and save those arms. That's all I gotta see. We've already seen injuries pile up, so.
Yeah, I think most of the moves that MLB has made this year have been with an eye towards trying to minimize wear and tear on players, whether it's position players who are going to play both ends of a doubleheader or just the team's bullpen use. Some of the moves that they've made have been things I'm not crazy about, like putting the runner on second base in extra inning games, which, by the way, in 7-inning doubleheaders, we should note means that a runner will go on second base if the game goes into the 8th inning. But 7-inning doubleheaders for this year, I think, make perfect sense. With the number of games that are going to have to be made up because of coronavirus, outbreaks. Hopefully, it doesn't happen again beyond the Cardinals, but we, can't count on that. And just general weather issues. You're going to have to play a lot of doubleheaders. And I think going to 7 innings for this year is smart. I'm willing to kind of wait and see whether it's something I want to see in Major League Baseball after this year, but for this year, I think it's the right move.
I'm actually growing on the extra inning rule is actually growing on me, where the runner's on second base. I think it's actually an interesting strategic element to things. So I actually, at first I said, yeah, that's something good for this year, but not for the future. And now I'm like, well, maybe that could stick around, just like the DH, bring on robo-umps. I'm not a traditionalist like a lot of baseball fans, so bring on all the changes. Let's liven this thing up.
Oh, the robo-umps, that's the key word. I tweeted
I know
this
it's
from the
growing on
account.
yours, Nick.
Yeah, I tweeted this from the account. I'm team robo-umps, and it's not just the Orioles games and some of those bad calls, because I watch more baseball games this year than I care to admit, because I don't want to be judged for how much baseball I'm watching, and it's bad all over the league. You've seen managers get ejected. It was the Padres the other night. Manny Machado had a called strike. That was a ball. That was a more borderline call, but. And then you see the Padres manager, Jace Tingler, get thrown out. And you've seen that a few times, because as soon as they come out for arguing balls and strikes, the umpires aren't going to listen. Which, watching umpires and coaches go at it in 2020 is also hilarious, when they have to pause to put your mask on. But yeah, the runner on second, I think, is growing on a lot of people. I still don't know how I feel about that one. But yeah, the robo umpires, I think let's go ahead and I think it might be time.
Yeah, I expect that it's, this year with the Atlantic League not really having its season and then minor league baseball not having a season, MLB lost some opportunities to test the robo-ump a little bit more. But I think that's going to continue to be a topic of conversation for the next few years. So the Orioles, after the doubleheader on Wednesday where they were swept by the Marlins, optioned DJ Stewart, who had been on the initial roster to start the season, down to Bowie. So he's going to go down there for instruction after a run in Baltimore that was not very good. He went 0 for 14 in 8 games, made 22 plate appearances overall. In that stretch, he walked 6 times but struck out 8. Now the Orioles have a lot of outfielders in their player pool still, including Ryan Mountcastle, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But needless to say, Stewart might not be one of the first guys they call upon if they need outfield help here in the next few weeks, given his struggles early on. Bob, what were your impressions of Stewart, and does this kind of change your expectations for him long term?
I mean, it's only 21 plate appearances, so it's really hard to determine much from that. And he did walk 6 times, but clearly he wasn't picking up the ball very well out of pitcher's hands. 8 strikeouts. Really not very competitive up there at the plate. I've always had a soft spot for DJ Stewart, especially last year when he was raking at AAA. I thought finally he's going to get his chance. And then, of course, he gets hurt and can't really get the playing time to give himself a shot coming into this year. But I just feel like he's going to get squeezed out. This was like the year I think he could have made an impression for the longer term. And starting next year, you're going to have guys like Diaz, McKenna, Mountcastle, all these outfielders, Hayes, Santander, Mancini. I just think it's going to be harder and harder for him to find playing time on this team. And I hope he can show them something at AA and come back a little bit later in the year and get one more chance. But I think his days as a Oriole regular might be coming to an end.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'm pretty much done with DJ Stewart after these few games. I've been a big DJ Stewart guy for a long time. He's a notoriously slow starter, as is, and so injuries last year really limiting him. So I was excited to know that he was going to be healthy when this season started, and I was hoping he would take advantage of it. But as I want to write him off right now and just say he's done. Kind of just follow what I think a lot of people, if you follow along with Orioles Twitter online, I think a lot of people are pretty much over DJ Stewart. But then you just look and see like he hasn't really had any plate appearances at the major leagues. And then when you look at some of those minor league numbers, just his progression through the minor leagues, he raked in high A, he raked in double A. He hasn't really hit the ball very well. You look at like a 230 batting average when he was in Delmarva, but a 366 on base percentage. And it's been those kind of numbers as he's moved up through the ranks. But you look at his WRC plus numbers, and they're 135, 137, 139 at double A and triple A and high A. So you want to say there's something there. He can do this. He can get on base. But yeah, I just didn't see anything in these few plate appearances that say, DJ Stewart's going to be that guy, that starter. I think that's definitely out of the question. But I don't know if he's going to get many more chances because, like you said, I had that written down too. Even guys like Kerstad, some of the guys in the 2019 draft class, guys like Kyle Stowers, some of those younger guys, not to mention Mountcastle, Diaz, McKenna's, they're all coming up, and I'd much rather watch them than DJ Stewart at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And the Orioles, top to bottom, their outfield depth is solid. And that causes some problems for Stewart because, as the McKennas and the Diaz's progress and Mountcastle as well, it is going to squeeze him out more. Stewart, I've always had some questions about, and my thought has always been the best case scenario might be that he fits in as a part-time player who brings you value on offense mainly by getting on base a lot. He'll get on base. I've never thought that he was going to emerge as a big-time power hitter, but especially with the short porch in right field at Camden Yards, gets on base, hits for enough power, doesn't hurt you so much on defense in left field that you're willing to give him a platoon role. I've always thought that might be the best case. I've thought for a while it might be the best case scenario with DJ Stewart. He didn't look good at all when he was up, and I was not surprised that he was sent down, especially because the Orioles do have other options down in Bowie that they could look at later in the year, not to mention a number of outfielders that are there. Long term, my expectation for right now is that maybe Stewart is back at Norfolk at the beginning of next year, just because you are going to have Trey Mancini back. The Orioles are going to have to figure out what to do with Mancini. I think Mountcastle factors into the lineup somewhere next year. I don't know that I see Renato Nunez going anywhere. And Chris Davis, until Chris Davis says, I've retired, or the Orioles say that they've released Chris Davis, I'm not expecting him to go anywhere until that contract's up. So you still have to account for those options being ahead of Stewart next year, and the fact that Stewart really didn't cash in on the opportunity he got at the start of the season.
Yeah, his best role might have been like a pinch hitter, backup, fifth outfielder on a National League team, and with the universal DH, that option might be out the window too. And I thought it was funny that Locked On Orioles tweeted out, what is the peak of DJ Stewart look like? And I responded, September 2018, because he had a great month. And then, unfortunately, he was never able to get back to that at the major league level.
Yeah, I just pulled these up too, and you're talking about, a platoon guy. His last 2019 numbers versus lefties, he hit 333, but he had no home runs and 2 doubles. But against righties, he only hit 190, but that's where all his power came from. He hit 4 home runs. So I have no idea what to think about him. So I don't know.
Yeah, to me, he's always had kind of an odd profile because he doesn't necessarily scream out right fielder to me, but he seems like he might be okay in left field. I think he runs a little bit better than what his body type suggests, but he's not going to steal a lot of bases. He might hit some home runs, but he's not going to hit enough to justify an everyday corner outfield spot. So it's really just a question then of, can he get on base? Can he hit for enough power in the right situations? And is his defense at least adequate?
It's a very good point.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because you don't want to bail on a former first-round pick, but at the same time, Stewart also is going to be 27 in November. The Orioles have a lot of outfield options, so I don't know what this is going to mean for him going forward.
It's crazy that he's 27. A guy like DJ Stewart is 27, but Miguel Castro is like 25. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe he can join Adam Jones in the KBO, or not the KBO, is MPO. Where did Adam Jones go?
Yeah, he went over to Japan.
Okay.
Yep.
That could be a good option for him. You see a lot of guys, DJ Stewart type guys, go over there.
Tweener, yeah.
Yeah, and it's certainly something to keep an eye on, not just for the rest of the season, but into the offseason to see what the Orioles decide they want to do with DJ Stewart. Shifting gears now, we're going to go from an outfielder who has just been sent down to the player pool to an outfielder that we have been basically saying we want up from the player pool since this season started, and that's Ryan Mountcastle. Mind you that we really don't know what goes on to player pool. So it's not as though I can rattle off that Mountcastle hit 4 home runs in an inter-squad game yesterday. I have no clue what Mountcastle is really doing beyond what has sort of been reported by various news outlets, which is that the Orioles are focusing on his defense and his plate discipline. Those are the two main areas of development that they want to see with Mountcastle. At the same time, as I wrote yesterday on Baltimore Sports and Life, the Orioles have gotten very little production from their left fielders so far this year. And while I think Dwight Smith is a decent hitter in the right role, specifically against right-handed hitters, Mountcastle has a higher ceiling. And Smith, it's worth noting, has really struggled over the course of his career in left field. So if the Orioles anticipate that Smith is going to get most of the at-bats with Stewart now down at Bowie, maybe Mountcastle's defense in that context doesn't look so bad. Because now you're looking, all right, well, Mountcastle's defense is not great, but it's not as though he's out there taking innings away from a defensive specialist. Because Dwight Smith has certainly not been that in his career in left field. So I'll start with you, Nick. Should we be watching Ryan Mountcastle right now, and when will we be watching Ryan Mountcastle?
We should be watching him right now. End of story. No, I got some numbers here that I pulled out. So first of all, just don't tell me that he needs to work on his defense and walk rate when, like you said, you got Dwight Smith Jr. out there, and he was that last night where he just let a ball that was dribbling towards him, he dropped, or he let roll past his glove, and another run scored. Like, you cannot make that kind of play. But, and then you look at guys like Alberto and Santander, both have 2% walk rates right now. Jose Iglesias has not walked all season. So clearly walks and bad defense are not an issue for the Orioles, or they're not an issue that the Orioles really seem to care about having in their lineup this year. But here's Ryan Mountcastle, his minor league production. So in Delmarva, he was 19 years old, and he had 42 extra base hits and a 745 OPS. The average age of pitchers in the South Atlantic League that year were 21.8 years old, so over 2 years older. In Frederick, he was 20 years old, put up an 885 OPS with 51 extra base hits. The average pitcher was, again, 2.8 years older than Mountcastle. Bowie, same thing. He was 21. The average pitcher was 3.5 years older than he was at 24.5 years old. 806 OPS. And in Norfolk, he was 22 years old, 61 extra base hits, 871 OPS, MVP award, and the average pitcher was 4 years older than him. Like, the guy is ranked against top, older talent at least. Go on our Twitter account, and I tweeted the video out again. There's Ryan Mountcastle, just a home run montage, hitting home runs off guys like Dylan Cease and Touki Toussaint, who put in a magnificent performance last night against the Blue Jays. The guy can hit big league pitching, and I shouldn't get this upset over this, but the Orioles know how to handle the prospects better than we do. Obviously, we're just fans, but we want to see him. We're like the only team who hasn't brought up a top prospect at this point. You lose 4 straight to the Miami Marlins, who are off for 10 days. And you look at the outfield production, guys, I don't think any outfielder has a WRC plus over like 25. Keeping in mind that 100 is league average, which tells you everything we need to know. John Mioli did put out that article. I don't know if you guys read it, about kind of the look inside of what they were doing with Mountcastle, studying Mike Trout heat maps and working on his defense and stuff, and which was a nicely timed piece considering all the attention Mountcastle's been getting. But, in that same article, he says, well, we work on this stuff in the morning, and then he goes off and faces live pitching, and he hit a home run the other day against Eric Handhold. Okay, it's Eric Handhold. Like, you're not going to get better facing Eric Handhold and Tom Eshelman down in Bowie. Like, start him already. There's no point in this. I don't get it anymore.
Not only do we only like excuse me, I can't speak. Are we not like the only team that doesn't have a top prospect up? I think there's been 80 players make their major league debuts this year, and the Orioles have 0 of them. So it's a little frustrating, especially when we're clearly one of the worst teams in the league. We have a lot of decent young players, and they're just not giving them the time of day right now. As a fan and as an Orioles fan, yeah, I want Mountcastle up yesterday. But I actually do believe that they're keeping him down to work on his defense. I think the time has passed. If they were literally just playing the waiting game to get past that, service time clock, he'd be up right now. I think they just want to get his defense in left field at least to a respectable enough level where they don't have to worry about teaching him how to play it in the middle of the season. I just don't think no matter what, I don't think they can wait too much longer, even if his defense never gets up to the level they want it to. Clearly, the guy can rake. He would infinitely help this lineup right now, and he should be up no later than next week.
Well, I really am a staunch believer that Mountcastle should be up right now. And I didn't get into this in my piece yesterday, but Nick's right. The Orioles just across the whole outfield this year have really not gotten much production at the plate. Now, you could look at some of the numbers and say, well, maybe in particular Smith, Santander, and Hayes start to turn it around a little bit. But at the same time, one of the most high upside hitters in your organization is right there. He's right on the cusp of the major leagues. I think if the season had gotten started as it was supposed to have before the pandemic, and we had minor league baseball, we had a full 162-game MLB season, Mountcastle would already be up. Not only would he not only be up, I think he probably would have been up for a couple of months. I know that the Orioles are doing what they can at the player pool, and I think that experience is going to be valuable for a lot of players. But at the same time, like Nick said, these inter-squad games, and Mountcastle's just going up there dominating, the Tom Esselmans of the world. It's not doing much for his development. You got to get him up. You got to get him facing major league pitching, or at least pitching from outside your own organization, and see what he can do. I'm not going to say that I think that Mountcastle would come in and win Rookie of the Year. I'm not going to go that far, but I do think that even if he comes in, if the strikeouts are a little high, the walks aren't exactly where you want them, he's still going to hit for power. He's still going to hit home runs, and he will make the lineup better. His defense, I do think that's a legitimate area of concern. I'm not sure yet that he's a long-term left fielder, but I think this season is the perfect time to experiment with that. Bring him up, see what he can do over, the balance of this year in left field. If you don't like what you see, you can still have the option to DH him or put him at first base from time to time. And then you figure out over the offseason, okay, from what we saw this year, can we say to Ryan Mountcastle, work on this specific part of your defense over the offseason? We're going to work on it repeatedly at spring training, and we're going to hope that it gets better. Or do you just, wash your hands and say Mountcastle's a first baseman and that's it? Regardless, though, I think the Orioles are better off putting him at the major league level to find that out than they are leaving him in Bowie.
It's a good point. And even if he comes up and struggles with the bat, at least he's getting experience against major league pitching, and he'll have a taste of it. He can work on whatever he needs to work on in the offseason and come into 2021 with a better game plan. Part of me wonders if the reason we haven't brought up any prospects yet is Elias maybe was scared the season was going to get scrapped and didn't want to waste a year and just wanted to hold back a little bit longer to see if the season did end, then they could just wait till the 3 weeks in the next season to start the clocks on teams, on these players. And maybe now that it seems like no matter what, Major League Baseball is going to push through, even if 600 other players get COVID, maybe then we'll start to see these guys come up.
Yeah, and I hate to get so impatient about it, but it's like we've watched him so much on the minor leagues, and we know what he can do. But I did appreciate a lot John Muley's article. I can't remember when it came yesterday or today, but I did really appreciate it. And some of the points he made being like the Orioles want to make sure he has left field down as much as he can before you throw him to the Wolves. And I agree with that. Using things like a striped baseball so you could follow the spin on his throws, like that's pretty cool. And I trust Mike Elias and the Orioles staff down there in Bowie are doing the right thing, preparing these guys all the way. We saw what the minor leaguers did last year at all levels. I'm trusting the process until Mike Elias gives me a reason not to. We talked about that before, like in our post-draft episode. But again, with a guy like Mountcastle, though, I see this year being an opportunity to, he's a young guy. Get him up in that clubhouse. He can watch the guys like the Jose Iglesias, these guys who are cast-offs, the Pat Vallecas. Like he can watch these cast-offs have kind of resurgence this year, watch how they go about their business. He can kind of create those friendships, that leadership opportunity in the clubhouse this year, and he can come out as a starter next year and become an early leader in what's probably going to be a really young clubhouse. Mountcastle could be your guy. Chris Davis may or may not be back next year. Why not turn the torch over to Mountcastle? I know Trey Mancini is still going to be there, true, but those younger guys could look up to Mountcastle and say, you just went through this. That's who I'm going to look up to right now. It had a transition into pro ball, and we'll see if it comes up. I hope it's soon, but again, I'm also not going to be surprised if it's September before we see him.
Yeah, the John Muley story was really good, and it does give you some insight into an area where we're kind of, a lot of us are kind of in the dark about exactly what goes on in the player pool. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a little while, but I just still think that, as Nick said, there's going to be some value in Mountcastle coming up this year. And going, regardless of whether he hits the ground running or he struggles a little bit, getting that time under his belt will help him next year. I really believe that. And I noted in my story that we have actually seen Mountcastle bounce back from a bad promotion before, and that was when he went to Bowie in 2017. His numbers there, I think relative to his age, the competition level weren't bad, but they certainly were not what we had seen from him before that. Bounce back, 2018, goes back to Bowie and has a great season. So we have seen Mountcastle overcome rough patches in his development before.
Yeah, and just be thrown around the ballpark, every position, and he takes it in stride. So, I think the kid is clearly a leader. On and off, I don't know him off the field, so I can't say that. But on the field, the guy's a leader, I feel like, and he does it with his bat. The strikeouts are an issue to low walks, but a lot of people always make note of how great of a two-strike hitter he is, and so again, hopefully it's soon. That's all I got to say. I think I was actually expecting it today. After getting swept by the Marlins for 4 games, I said, I bet he gets called up today only because the Orioles know, we need fans to tune in on Friday and watch this game, so we're going to bring him up. But it didn't happen.
Based on anecdotal evidence, it seems like he has that growth mindset that Elias and Sig are looking for. So hopefully he's taken in all the lessons. And do we have a prediction for when we do think we'll see him?
So we'll see what happens with Mountcastle here over the coming days and weeks. But we also wanted to get into some players that have been added to the Orioles player pool in recent days. So earlier this week, Kyle Bradis, Ryan McKenna were both added. Bradis was acquired in the deal that sent Dylan Bundy to the Angels. McKenna has been in the system for a while, added to the 40-man roster over the offseason, an outfielder. And then Bruce Zimmerman, who we were all kind of wondering why Zimmerman was not in Bowie right away. It turns out that he had tested positive for coronavirus last month. Fortunately, is healthy now and will be getting some time in Bowie and could be someone that we see either in the bullpen or in the rotation later this year. Today, the Orioles also announced that they've added Gunnar Henderson, their second pick in the 2019 draft to the player pool, a young player who is years away from the major leagues, but someone we're very anxious to see on the field. And Brian Gonzalez, who was not a name that any of us necessarily thought would be added to Bowie, but it does give the Orioles another left-handed option out of the bullpen, so they need help later in the season. Bob, what are your thoughts on some of the players that the Orioles have added in recent days?
Well, I definitely was glad to see Zimmerman make the list, and it makes total sense now in hindsight why he wasn't on the original pool, because he had such a great early spring training and seemed to impress the team and the manager and all that. So glad he's recovered from COVID and he can hopefully get his strength back, get his pitch count up, and maybe we'll see him sometime in August or September. McKenna makes a lot of sense. He can give you speed and defense if nothing else, and get geared up towards helping us towards the end of the season, or at least ready for next season. Bradish was a little surprising, but the Orioles must just like him quite a bit after acquiring him from the Angels. Gunnar Henderson, I assumed he would show up eventually. Clearly one of our best prospects, even though he's super young. He has a ton of potential, and you want to get him as much, quality coaching as you can. Yeah, Brian Gonzalez, that was definitely out of left field. I was surprised it wasn't a guy like Zach Lowther or Alexander Wells, but maybe he's a guy that is on the fringes of being a minor league free agent after the season, and they want to just see if he can sink or swim. Maybe they just want to give him in here to give some of, I haven't really looked at the roster at Bowie, if maybe there's a lack of lefties, crafty lefties, and they want to see what Mountcastle can do against someone like that. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure they have a reason for why he was added to the list.
It does look like he's, I don't know if he was Rule 5 draft eligible last year as well, but he's definitely Rule 5 draft eligible this year. Gonzalez is. That was definitely a surprising one. I think he was a guy who early on last year, they converted him to a reliever. He was a starter throughout his career. Third round draft pick back in 2014, which I believe that was the year where the Orioles didn't have a first or second round pick. And so I think Brian Gonzalez was their first draft pick that year. I didn't check that, so I could be wrong there, but I believe that's right. He's just an average starter. He worked pretty slowly through the minor leagues, but he got up to Bowie this year, and they moved him to reliever, and his numbers are a little bit better. A guy that's not going to strike a lot of people out. Walks are iffy, although he really cut down on his walk rate this year. But he had a 4.32 ERA out of the pen. He had a 5.69 ERA in Bowie last year as a starter. So I don't know how much you're going to get out of Gonzalez. I love that Gunnar Henderson is up. That's a young kid who only got half a season last year in rookie ball. And now I think this year, him missing a whole year of development could be pretty rough. So I'm glad he's up there. But it's at 59 now. And I don't believe any of the 2020 draft picks are up, which is weird to me considering they're all, mostly except those last two picks, those were advanced college SEC bats. And you think they could be contributors in 2022, 2023. And they didn't really get to play at all this year in college level. So they've got a whole year now that they're going to miss out on development. So I'm wondering, maybe that last spot is Kjerstad. I don't know, but I feel like at this point you're going to save that last spot for a free agent or a trade or whatever it may be. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised too. I thought at the bare minimum Kjerstad would be a guy out of the 2020 draft class who went to Bowie, and maybe he could still go there, but certainly the Orioles pushing their limit right now. Gonzalez, for me, is kind of an interesting addition. It's not someone that I would have expected to be a fit at the major league level this year, and I still think that if 3-4 weeks from now the Orioles need a lefty, Zimmerman's got to be one of the first guys they look at. But Gonzalez did cut back on the walks last year, and he would have been the guy coming into this year, even if he had gone back to Bowie initially, who I think would have been sort of on the radar a little bit to see, okay, can the improvements that we saw last year after he moved to the bullpen carry over this year? And is there something there, or is this just kind of an outlier? Is he really the pitcher that we saw earlier in his career? The rest of that group, McKenna, I do think there could be a role for later this year, especially because, as Bob mentioned, if nothing else, he gives you speed and defense. So let's say you have Mountcastle up there, you want to leave him in left field, but you're finding as time goes on, okay, we don't really want him out there for the last 6 outs of the game in a tight game. McKenna becomes the guy you put out there. You could put McKenna, I think, really at any of the 3 outfield spots on a short-term basis and have that work. I think he's going to need more time in the minor leagues next year just to get that back going, if they're going to try to get that going again. But I think for speed and defense, he can help the Orioles this year. Henderson, I love the move to bring him there. This was someone I had pretty high hopes for coming into 2020. And for me, he's one of the big wild cards, and that we don't know what the lost year of development with not having a minor league season is going to do for him. Will it prove to be a setback? Or is it going to be one of those things where he's young, he stays focused, while the shutdown goes on, he does well at the player pool, and it has no effect at all on his timeline in the majors. He's kind of a wild card to me, so I'm glad to see the Orioles are putting him in Bowie for a little while.
Yeah, one more point I just thought about with Brian Gonzalez. The Orioles did that with a couple of their guys down in Bowie last year. The guys who were kind of fringy starters, have a few good outings, but then they're gonna, for every good outing, they're gonna get rocked twice. A guy like Christian Alvarado, who is honestly probably my favorite minor leaguer in the entire system. If you were to ask me who my favorite Baltimore Orioles minor leaguer is, it's not Mountcastle, it's not Grayson Rodriguez, it is honestly Christian Alvarado. I can't tell you why. I just love watching that guy pitch, and he worked as the Bowie closer, had 15, 16 straight save opportunities. He was fantastic out of the bullpen. I think he touched like 97, 98 last year. He wasn't that great in spring training. I think he was with spring training with the Orioles, the first spring training this year. But it's still, you got two examples there, guys who they converted from starter to reliever. Hunter Harvey being another one, the big one there. Dylan Tate. Now I'm just thinking about all the bigger names now that I'm talking about it. But like Gonzalez isn't at that level, but the Orioles seem to be having success doing that, so I guess why not give him a shot?
Yeah, and circle back to an earlier point that Nick brought up on Gonzalez. Gonzalez was the top pick in that 2014 draft, coming in the third round. Interestingly enough, the best pick in that draft so far has been the 11th rounder by the name of John Means.
That is interesting.
So he's by far been the best player taken for the Orioles in that draft. Stevie Wilkerson was also selected as an 8th rounder. And Tanner Scott was chosen in the 6th round. And I know that if you follow at BSL on the Verge on Twitter, you'll note that there's been a lot of Miguel Castro talk there. So I wanted to make sure we allowed time to discuss Miguel Castro, because I know that Nick has a lot to say about what he has seen from Miguel Castro this year and what he likes.
Yeah, I wonder who's in charge of the Twitter account.
I'm just saying, 6.1 innings, 4 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. He leads all of Major League Baseball in reliever wins above replacement at 0.4. He's hitting 98. He's got a 92-mile-an-hour changeup. Like, I don't want to say I'm sold yet, but I'm so glad to see that he's doing well. It's the entire bullpen really as a whole. Looking at the bullpen again for my article on Sunday, which I think is going to be about these guys, they ranked 8th in all of baseball in combined bullpen WAR. They're not allowing home runs, which they led the league in last year. They've got a 4.20 ERA, but a 3.01 FIP. So maybe a little bit bad luck on their side, which that's ranked 7th in the majors. Top ground ball percentage in the majors. And sorry, Bob, but if you take out Cody Carroll's numbers, they'd be even better. So, which again, Cody Carroll was a great pick. I was all aboard the Cody Carroll hype train, but the bullpen's solid so far this year, and Miguel Castro is leading the way. So hopefully he keeps it up. He could blow it up this weekend. I don't know. They're playing the Nationals right now. I don't know what the score or what the inning is, but it's almost
7-0 Orioles. Tommy Malone is a force.
So I mean, they could bring him in now, and we end up losing this game, and Miguel Castro era is over. But I love what I'm seeing out of him so far this year.
No, to be fair, he has looked outstanding. I think he's touched 99 on that sinker with that nasty changeup, which I thought was his fastball the first time he came in, and I'm like, oh wait, no, he's throwing in a pitch 7 miles an hour faster. He has let a couple inherited runners score, but he miles better than the last couple of years. Sometimes I guess it just takes some time for mechanics to get ironed out, and I would love if he turned into, with Michael Givens likely on the way out, maybe Miguel Castro slides into that 8th inning role.
Yeah, I've always felt like Castro is a better pitcher than what his numbers would lead you to believe, and I'm really happy to see that he's turning it around. So far with Tanner Scott, who was actually my breakout pick, He's only thrown 3 2/3 innings, but the strikeouts are there. He struck out 4 batters so far against 2 walks. Has not allowed a run yet, or has not allowed an earned run yet, not been charged with a run. So hopefully we see him improve. Yeah, the bullpen right now looks good, and I really think that even if Givens does go later in the year, that could still be a strength on the team, particularly if Dylan Tate or Hunter Harvey get healthy at some point, or if one of the names we talked about earlier, like Zimmerman, gets added down the road from Bowie.
Yeah, you got all of those guys who I think could come up and really help. And I like Tanner Scott's stuff a lot this year too. And I think his slider ranks as one of the top. The Fangraphs has his slider as one of the most valuable sliders in all of baseball as far as relievers go this year already. So, and again, I know it's all early, but that's good to see these guys turning around. Like maybe I think I wrote this on the board that maybe with all of this, if the Orioles end up with a decent season, or you see guys like Scott and Castro, Rio Ruiz, if you see these types of players break out this year or have really good years, like I think that says a lot about this system and says we can really trust this system. Like imagine what they are doing down in Bowie with Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall type players. If at the major league level we can turn Rio Ruiz and Miguel Castro into positive players.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So I did want to circle back to this because Nick had brought it up in the show. This is from an Orioles inbox on their website, and it was a rundown of the players who are arbitration eligible after this year. The first-year eligibles are a pretty long list. Son Armstrong, Anthony Santander, Pedro Severino, Pat Valleca, Astor Wojciechowski, and Renato Nunez. Michael Givens will be the only third-year eligible player. Second-year eligible will be Trey Mancini, Hanser Alberto, and Miguel Castro. So, and definitely an interesting group there.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of guys who get traded out of that list. The Sharon Armstrong, maybe even the Severino. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but give Francisco more playing time.
Give Chance a chance.
Yeah. Severino could be a trade option. I think his contract is up, or he's arbitration eligible. So are the Orioles going to want to go through that with him? I don't know. And Sharon Armstrong has actually been really good for the last 2 seasons. So I think a team comes calling for him as well. And whatever you can get out of him would be great. If you can turn Mike Wright into end up being a lottery type prospect that you get back for Sharon Armstrong, that's a good deal. So.
Yeah, I know Luke Seiler, who just got hired by the Orioles in the offseason, saw something in Shawn Armstrong and even noted on Twitter before he got hired, like a couple changes he could make to even get better. And maybe he's been part of why he's looked so good early this year. I don't know. But yeah, I think there might be some non-tender candidates in the offseason that might make Orioles fans scratch their heads. But hopefully they can, at very least, maybe they'll trade them like a VR trade where they get less than people want, but they at least get something out of them.
Yeah, and I said Joe Trezza of the Orioles wrote that. So definitely, like we were saying, an interesting group. Severino, I do want to talk about for a minute because San Francisco is really hitting well right now. And that was someone that I know we were all a little skeptical about coming into this year. But do you think going forward, and I'll start with you, Nick, do you think that Brandon Hyde relies on him a little bit more? And if so, do you think he gets consistent at bats behind the plate, or does Hyde take advantage of having 3 catchers and maybe start moving Cisco around a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know what he's going to do. It seems like maybe with Severino, he's obviously your best overall guy behind the dish and at the plate. Severino's also been hitting the ball pretty well this year. And again, if you're saying that you're going out to win ball games this year, I think Severino may give you that best opportunity. But when you're talking about development, looking at the long term, you got to give Chance Cisco that opportunity, just because Severino's not going to be around, I don't think, much longer. With his contract running out and just his age right now, I think Cisco's a little bit younger, but Cisco was that former top prospect, a homegrown top prospect. I know Severino was as well, but Cisco is a guy who the Orioles have put a lot of time and effort into. And with this year, when he catches behind the plate, I don't notice he's there, which is the highest praise I think you can give Chance Sisco this year. You don't know he's back there because usually it's clear who is behind the plate because there's balls always bouncing off the bricks behind the plate. But he's hitting the ball hard. His average exit velocity is 96.6 miles per hour. He has a 647 on base percentage. That's absurd. That's not going to stick, obviously, but I think he needs to be back behind the plate more. I don't know. Changing positions, I'm going to say at this point they're not going to do it. They've spent the last, 4 years working on his catching. I don't think they're going to move positions, so he needs just regular at-bats. That's all he needs, but I don't think he's going to get it right now. Maybe once it's clear they're out for good this year in the standings, maybe Hyde goes to him, but...
Yeah, I mean, if we're in enough doubleheaders, he'll get playing time just on that alone. I've been calling for over a year now that I think in a perfect world he could be a guy that can play a little first base, second base, left field, third catcher, emergency catcher, DH. Just get his bat in the lineup. He's got a great approach. He's starting to turn on the ball now. I just think there's so much potential there. I don't know if he'll ever let it all click together, but I just feel like he could be like a Ben Zobrist type potentially, but it doesn't seem like maybe they just think it's not possible, but I don't know. I think it sucks that he's limited to a backup catcher role who gets in 2 games a week the way he's hitting the ball.
Yeah, it's hard to limit Severino's playing time, and I think that's one of the issues that Brandon Hyde's dealing with. I don't think you would see that move to first base or second base necessarily during a season. But I do think that, especially with having Brian Holiday on the roster, so you have a third catcher, it might be worth getting Sisco more at bats between first base and DH, maybe alternating him and Severino, especially if Chris Davis does not get going this year.
Yeah, I thought that was weird when they brought up Holiday, and I believe I can't remember what move precipitated that, but I know it was a pitcher, I believe. But then you bring up Holiday.
Cody Carroll, my beloved.
Yeah, that's right. So you get rid of a pitcher, a bullpen arm that you need, and then you bring up a catcher. I thought a trade was going to happen soon after that. I thought maybe this is it. They're moving Severino, but that hasn't been the case yet. But I don't know. We'll see with Sisco.
Yeah,
I guess it's a good problem to have, a guy you wish could get more playing time because he's hitting the ball well. Orioles haven't had that problem in a while.
Very true. Yeah, and it's been a while since we've been able to really say optimistic things about Sisco's bat, but I think it's warranted right now. He's getting on base. We're seeing signs that he still has room to develop with his power. That's always been one knock on Sisco, is that even if the average and the on-base tools are there, the power's not going to be. And I don't think he's all of a sudden going to turn into a power hitter overnight, but maybe we at least see him hit enough doubles, drive the ball into the gap a little bit more, that now you're not just relying on him to hit singles around and draw walks.
Yep.
So we covered a lot today, but a lot going on as the Orioles continue their season, continue adding their player pool, moving players around a little bit more, and hopefully in the coming weeks we will have a show discussing the debut of Ryan Mountcastle. But until then, we've covered a lot of ground today. Before we finish up here, Bob, any thoughts on anything we didn't cover you want to discuss?
Yeah, I think I'd like to give a shout-out to Mo Gaba. I think he passed since our last recording, and I thought it was awesome what the Orioles did on the home opener, on the scoreboard before the game, and just seemed like an amazing kid with a great perspective on life, and he made the most of it, and you just shout out to him and his family. Condolences.
Yeah, absolutely. A really tough loss for his family and for Baltimore sports. Both the Orioles and the Ravens put together really touching tributes for him. Nick, any final thoughts?
Yeah, the home opening ceremony just had me all over the place. And then you have John Means with his dad passing away this week. It's a lot of sad news around Baltimore, and it sucks that we can't all go to Camden Yards and celebrate this and celebrate their life of these people, these members of Birdland. And I just think to opening day 2021 is going to be something really special, I think, in Baltimore. Pray that we can go and we're there by March or April of next year. But I think to follow all that up, I hate to follow this up with more baseball talk, but Renato Nunez just hit a home run, and he now has 5 on the year. So there's our bet there.
Come on, Rio, get your shoulder back in gear.
And for reference, we're discussing our episode from a couple of weeks ago where we went down and we made predictions for the year. Who would lead the team in home runs was one of them. Nick and I both went with Renato Nunez. Bob picked Rio Ruiz, which looked like a great pick for about the first week of the season, but now Nunez is starting to catch up there.
Chalk eaters.
Well, we'll re-explore our predictions later in the year, but for now, we'll see how things unfold. Bob, Nick, thank you for being on today. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this has been Zach Spedden. Continue to follow us on Twitter at BSL on the Verge, and look for stories on Baltimore Sports and Life covering college sports, the Orioles, and the Ravens. Bob and I both had new articles this week. Nick will have one coming up on Sunday. Join us on the discussion board, and we will see you next week.
If you're updating your closet for summer, you need dependable clothes that you can wear anywhere, whatever you're doing. And for that, you can look to American Giant. American Giant makes clothing of exceptional quality for people who want something more than the status quo offers. Whether you need to re-up on reliable everyday t-shirts, pick up a solid pair of shorts, or invest in a pair of durable jeans, American Giant is a better choice. They make everything right here in the USA, from start to finish. So when you buy from American Giant, you become part of creating jobs and improving local communities in towns and cities all across the country. And keeping things local ensures the kind of quality you'll feel and appreciate for years to come. Shop your new summertime closet staples at american-giant.com and get 20% off your order when you use code WA23 at checkout. That's 20% off at american-giant.com with promo code WA23.